Welcome, everybody. Not sure how many people we have in our meeting so far. I'm just letting you know that if you're joining us for the MoRPh Estuaries Citizen Science 3Cs webinar, then you are in the right place. We're just making sure we've got all our technology working at this end. And then we will be about to start in a few moments. We just wait for a few more people to join us. We've had a really good response. Thank you very much if you're coming after filling in the questionnaire that we circulated through various channels. Just want to let everybody know that we'll be starting in a couple of minutes when people have joined the call. We're just waiting for a few more people to join now. While we're waiting, just to let you know, we will be recording the webinar. If anybody has any questions throughout the course of the session, you'll be able to submit these through the Q&A function, which is the bottom of your screen. And you can also enable the captions by clicking the CC on the bottom toolbar to show subtitles. I'm going to hand over to Tom to do a formal introduction to the project. Now we're getting a few more people. Tom, whenever you feel ready, if you think we've got enough people, I'm happy to make a start.
We only have 18 at the minute, Lucy, so we'll give it another couple of minutes, and that we're expecting about 30 odd.
Sure, no problem at all. While people are just joining, I just want to welcome everybody before we have our official welcome. Make sure that, I think you can probably see the chat as well, can you, for the housekeeping. So just to let people know that we will be recording the webinar. I don't think anybody who's joining the meeting will be on camera, so you don't need to worry about that. Just the ones of us which are presenting will be here. And we definitely encourage you to submit questions through the Q&A function, which we'll be picking up towards the end in our Q&A session. There's a nice note from Rebecca there. Thank you. Yes, it's the first Monday back for some after Easter break as well. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you so much for your responses to the questionnaire.
Okay, hi everyone. we will make a start, given it's 2:05, and we have a packed programme today. I'm delighted to welcome you to this MoRPh Estuaries webinar, and we're very keen to discuss our tool to assess physical habitat condition on estuary margins. I'd like to thank you all for filling out our questionnaire. That'll be really important to inform us how we think you can best use the tool. And as usual, I'd just like to say thank you to our funders, the Environment Agency, who funded this project through the Championing Coastal Coordination Fund. As Lucy noted, there are some notes in the chat, so if you are submitting any questions, please do that through the Q&A function. If there are any comments, then please share them in the chat box. The webinar is being recorded, so there will be a recording available afterwards, and we hope you enjoy it. So I'll pass on to Lucy now, who's going to take us through the agenda today.
Oh, there we go. Let's stick on the right slide at the right time. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Tom, for that introduction. Yeah, welcome everybody. For me, I'm Lucy Shuker. I'm here as part of the project team partnership, and we are really happy to be welcoming you so we can share news of our 3Cs project about MoRPh Estuaries this afternoon. So we have a packed programme, as Tom has said. We basically are going to be giving you an introduction to what MoRPh Estuaries is and how our 3Cs project has come together. It's a citizen science project. It started off with a pilot, and Geraldine Wharton from Queen Mary University of London will be telling us a bit about that, and also Heather from the Rivers Trust. Oh, I haven't managed to put that on there. Apologies to Heather Bell, who will be updating us about the MoRPh Estuaries story map and coastal data hub that was part of that initial pilot. We're then going to hear from the project partners about what's been happening since the pilot. We've got some exciting talks about that, and then so we'll talk a bit more about what we've been doing this year in phase 1 and also what we're planning for phase 2, and then we've got an interactive session. So yes, please do put your questions into the Q&A function. We're really interested to hear more about how MoRPh Estuaries could be helpful to you in your projects, and we will have a chance to have a bit more interactive Q&A at the end. We're going to have a few polls as well. Apologies for lots of questions from us, but we want your questions too. So at the end, we'll just wrap it all up, hopefully in time to finish by 4. Just to let everybody know again, we are recording the session. I think there's probably no option for you other to be on mute. Apologies, Zoom events are new for me. But yes, do ask your questions and we'll pick it up later. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Professor Geraldine Wharton from Queen Mary University of London. If it's okay with you, Geraldine, shall I continue to share your slides here, or would you like your...
No, that's fine, Lucy. There are only
Excellent.
2 slides. So, hello, I'm Geraldine Wharton, as Lucy said, from Geography Department at Queen Mary University of London. So I'm really excited to be sharing with you what we've progressed so far in terms of MoRPh Estuaries, the citizen science version tool for assessing physical habitat condition of the margins of estuaries. And just wanted to put all the names and the logos here because I think this has been a really an exciting feature of the project, just how collaborative it's been with large number of partners bringing huge amounts of expertise, working with citizen science volunteers working in estuaries. Just a huge thank you to everybody, and as Tom said, our funders through the 3Cs Environment Agency programme. So could you put on the next slide, Lucy, please? Thank you. So MoRPh Estuaries and why is it needed? Well, just sort of a broader context before we get into lots of the case studies that the partners will share. And I think we're all here because we know how important estuaries are, but I think the more people study estuaries, the more people are understanding just how rich they are in biodiversity, how important they are, providing a whole range of essential services like blue carbon, storage of carbon, their role in filtering pollutants and transport of sediment through catchment systems. So we have people on the team who are studying all aspects of estuary processes and habitats. So the issues we have with estuaries are they have this huge potential to be restored from, in many cases, they're heavily modified conditions. So over the centuries and recent decades in particular, they've become very modified hydrologically. Their flows modified with various structures on them, morphologically modified, the estuary margins modified, and through dredging, etc. So modifications through pollutants as well, sediment bound pollutants and water contamination, and they are highly vulnerable to sea level change, coastal erosion, so all these impacts of climate change. And just the sort of broader context, having worked on the MoRPh Rivers, the Modular River Survey for many years and been part of that development and working with citizen science groups, we had lots of conversations with the team there. So Lucy and myself and Richard Charman at the Environment Agency and others, thinking about, well, what happens when we get into that transitional zone, when we start to have tidal influence? And we're realizing the more we spoke to people that there was no appropriate habitat assessment tool for these transitional zones that are highly complex. So we think that estuaries are fully deserving of their own survey, and we started developing the MoRPh Estuaries tool, and thanks to a lot of the groundwork to Lucy Shuker and Richard Charman going out and starting to look at these environments and put together a survey tool, we were in a position when the first 3Cs call came out with the Environment Agency funding to put in a bid, and that pilot study allowed us to really make huge strides. So we were able to go to lots of stakeholder groups and different organisations and pull together a really exciting team of people. So the need for the tool has been articulated across statutory bodies, professional consultants and NGOs, so a wide range of people calling for a tool. And then with the pilot, we had some money to actually begin doing some practical training and developing the survey forms, and beginning to look at some of the data through the values that we were getting for some of the early results on the estuaries. So MoRPh is short for Modular River Physical, and now that we have MoRPh Estuaries, it's become part of this family of physical assessment methods. And what it allows us to do is to then, through its complementary approach to MoRPh Rivers, is to begin this process of developing a fully integrated approach, this source to sea approach. So we can have a set of tools for the MoRPh Rivers combining with MoRPh Estuaries, or we can go from the non-tidal freshwater parts of the catchment through to the saline sections of the river reaches and the estuaries. So we'll see some illustrations of that later this afternoon. But I think what I really want to stress is that it's an exciting field-based method. So we offer training for our citizen scientists working with professionals. And the whole premise of the field survey approach is very much focused on the observations, and you're recording what you see, out in the field and then building the evidence. And it's supported by an online platform called Cartographer. So Lucy, could you just put up the final slide? Thank you. So I've mentioned this pilot phase, which was carried out last year. So this initiative, we hit the ground sprinting with some early work in December 21, and the aims of that project, which we've fulfilled, we tested the prototype or the beta version of our field survey tool and the training materials. We were fortunate to work with the Wyre River Trust and Thames 21, so we did local trials in those two estuaries. We worked with communities and local authorities, developers, statutory authorities. So these were our key early aims, and we're continuing with those. And we continue with the project to disseminate evidence of physical habitat condition and pressures to local stakeholders. And we want to very much continue sharing the tool and generating interest via the Coastal Partnership Network community, and sort of linking our the catchment-based groups with the Coastal Partnership Network. So in terms of our sort of big findings, outcomes, to the point we're at now, where we're into the phase 1 of the main project, in the Wyre catchment, we have a team of at least 12 citizen scientists trained, continuing to conduct surveys, 40 to date. You'll hear a bit more about one of those projects from Heather. Detailed analysis is continuing, following on from these surveys. And also you'll hear about the story map, which was created and publicly available. And that's something that we will continue to update. So we're at a stage now where we've conducted this pilot phase. We're into the next phase of the project, and we initiated this national questionnaire, as we explained in some of the blurb that was circulated, because we wanted to reach out to as many people as possible to really gather information on how we can best work with you to assist you in collecting data and building evidence on your estuaries, and then we can begin to develop a network of trained citizen scientists and professionals across the country, working in different types of estuaries and beginning to understand how we can use that evidence to then protect and also restore and sensitively manage those estuary environments. So that's what we're really hoping for some of the discussions as well this afternoon, as well as all the valuable responses that we've had from the questionnaires. So thank you for filling those in. Thank you for being here today and sharing your experiences with us. And hopefully we can go from here into building this network and these regional hubs through our MoRPh Estuaries champions. So thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussions.
Thanks, Geraldine. We're going to hand on to Heather Bell now. And Heather, if you're able to share slides and share screen, I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Okay. Can you all see that all right? Can you see that okay? Yeah, okay, brilliant. Okay, so, and you can see the story map where it says, what is MoRPh Estuaries, Lucy? Yeah, okay, brilliant. So this is well, I'll just go from the beginning. I'm Heather Bell and I work at the Rivers Trust. I'm a senior data analyst. and I'm going to just go over the story map that we made last year as part of this project, and then I'll quickly discuss the coastal data hub as well that we've been developing. So the MoRPh Estuaries story map, I've just sent the link out in the chat, so if you have some time this afternoon, I know Becca said it's a sleepy afternoon, it's the first afternoon back for a lot of people, including me, after a holiday. So if you want to sit down with a cup of tea or something this afternoon and have a look through that, there's a lot of information in here that you can find out about MoRPh estuaries, and also just generally the importance of healthy estuaries. So the first tab, if we go through, is just an overview about what MoRPh estuaries is. And I know Geraldine just gave us a really good background to this as well. So there's some more information here. And it also discusses the pilot sites that we did last year as part of that project, and gives a quick tour of some of these sites that were discussed by Geraldine. There's also a section which is called Importance of Healthy Estuaries. So on here, there's a lot of information about what a typical estuary is, and habitats and wildlife, designated sites, hydrology, access and recreation, and blue carbon. So yeah, there's a real wealth of information that we've all kind of pulled together in the last project, including some really interesting information about selective tidal transport by fish in here. And also the next section is talking about understanding the issues in estuaries. So we have climate change, physical modification, flooding, water quality and policy legislation. So in this section, you can also read everything about the climate change risks here, but also as you go through, there's map layers that you can switch on and off. For example, here to look at salt marsh change. I don't think it's going to load with this internet. Okay. And lastly, there's a page about how to get involved with MoRPh estuaries and how to volunteer to become a citizen scientist. There will be a map of data. I think this is probably something we could add in now, actually, with that information. So that will be coming soon, and there's who to contact here as well. And then just briefly as well to touch on the Coastal Data Hub, which is a part of a different 3Cs project that I've been working on this year. So that's for the National Framework for Coastal Collaboration, the National 3Cs project that's going on. And in this project, we're in the sort of early development phase. So this is a draft Coastal Data Hub that we're developing. And you can explore some of the data that's in here. So the aim would be that this is a catchment to coast data portal for coastal practitioners. And what would be really useful as well is if you have time, there's a feedback tab to say what kind of data you're using in your field, what's going to be really useful for you to have on there. And that's about it really, so we can move on to the next person. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Heather. It's really exciting to hear about all the work that you're doing there with the new coastal partnership networks that are being set up, and hearing about the data hub is really exciting, having worked for years on the Rivers Trust side with the Catchment data hub. I know what a valuable resource that is and how important it's going to be for the coastal partners as well. So that sort of brings our first part of the webinar moving forward now from sort of talking about what happened about in the pilot stage, which was 2021 2022. Next we had phase 1, which all came about very late in 22-23. We were really excited that there was this opportunity coming forward through the Environment Agency for funding through the 3Cs programme, which Geraldine's mentioned, the Championing Coastal Coordination, and we really wanted to be a part of that, so we submitted our bid and we were very happy to be successful with that funding. And the only challenging part for us, the main challenging part, was that it got squeezed into the very end of this last financial year. So we had lots of things that we wanted to do, but quite limited time. Hence the questionnaire was sort of up front and centre. So what we wanted to do, and also this event, to let you know about what our project partners have been doing. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to 3 of the main sort of active project partners. We've got the Steve from the Institute of Fisheries Management first, then followed by Heather from the Wires Rivers Trust, and Hannah from Thames 21, who are going to tell us about what it's been, you know, the importance to them of MoRPh Estuaries and how that fits in with what they're doing on the ground as well. So I'm going to hand over to Steve now. Hopefully, will you be able to share your slides, Steve? And take it from there. Looks like it's all happening. Perfect. We can see that. If you'd like to go into presenter view, that would be excellent.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get rid of that.
Slideshow is what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to get into that. Sorry, something's stopping me. Not stopping me. I'm going to have to do this another way. For some reason, my screen has frozen. So I'm going to run these as a series of slides to do it as a presentation. But let me start off, ladies and gentlemen, explaining some background. I spent 35 years in the Environment Agency, and I led the team that developed the transitional fish monitoring program. I left in 2011. And by then, we had trained up a lot of staff in how to do the fish sampling in estuaries. I also did a lot of work in salt marshes as well. After I left, I set up as a consultancy, but also did a lot of work for my professional institute, the IFM, where we do a lot of technical training and support for other organisations, some of whom wanted to do the transitional waters fish sampling. But increasingly what started to happen is people came forward from Wildlife Trust and elsewhere to say, I have 20 volunteers. Could you show them how to do some sort of fish survey in an estuary or a salt marsh? This slowly built up over the last decade. COVID, of course, got in the way, but in 2021, we were starting a new program when I started a new dialogue with Lucy and her colleagues. And what I was pointing out is here we are doing some citizen science, and you are as well. And also, there are very few people who understand how fish use salt marshes and estuarine areas. You'll read some of that in the story map. But what we now know clearly is that salt marsh vegetation is some of the optimal nursery habitat for juvenile fish, who rise into that habitat very actively as the tide comes in, feed heavily, and then lead as the tide drops out, giving them a whole series of beneficial advantages, which help them survive and grow faster. But of course, we've removed most of this habitat, so it's vital to put it back. So I started to engage in phase 1 of Estuary MoRPh, trying to feed some of this information in while conducting our own survey program as well.
Steve, if it's helpful, I can share your slides for you from,
yeah, no,
from my team.
actually, what all that's happened is for some reason, oh no, wait a minute, I'm going to be able to do it now. Wait a minute. It was the captioning which had stopped me doing it. That's all. So this first slide of mine is up on the wire in October of last year, helping Tom Wire and his team. And this is a standard process we do, doing the health and safety first. In this case, it's about 12 keen volunteers turning up. And again, this is all about synergy, because these are 12 volunteers that Tom is using for another purpose, and we can train them in something else in the same sort of field. So there's a lot of connections here. Now, for some reason, my slides have stopped moving forward. Great. I'm now on the first slide of my presentation, and the system is locked. Not sure why that's happening. Yeah, sorry about that. I've locked up completely for some reason. What I can do, as I can, maybe if people see the slides later, I can talk through this process myself verbally. I've had to do this before. We, in last year, developed a whole series of these fish surveys to set up for a whole range of clients across the country. working closely with Estuary MoRPh during this process. By the end of the year, we'd worked with 20 different organizations and as many as, can you do the second slide? Can you process the second slide? That's great. This program had a series of aims, but one of the issues here is that neither the Environment Agency nor other regulators and operators have done much survey work in estuaries or salt marshes per se across the UK. There are lots of gaps, so we can fill in some of those gaps with expert supervised surveys driven and operated by citizen scientists. And if we get our methodologies right, it is good, basic, robust science, and it has major social benefits. So we'd started to do this some years ago, as I say. Early last year, we were working with Estuary MoRPh as well as part of that project. And then interestingly, in the middle of the year, Natural England come to us and say, we're really impressed with what you're delivering. Would you like some more money? We'd like to make you part of the Marine Natural Capital Ecosystem Assessment process. You'll become one of our project streams. So we're gaining more and more kudos and respect for this process as it develops. And as I say, it's filling an evidence gap. Next slide, please. So what do? We worked all over the country, often doing the health, always doing the health and safety first, which is bottom left there. That's some rangers upon the Tyne Estuary who want to get involved in something. Top right is up near Lindisfarne, in a small drain, working with Environment Agency and IFCA colleagues there, as well as some volunteers from Coast Care. And then bottom right, that's a thin-lit grey mullet. So we're working all over the country and doing all sorts of things. Next slide, please. You might have noticed on that last text, it talked about a multiple method survey approach. We developed this for Water Framework Directive. Single method will not show you everything. If you're doing a consistent methodology in the same place and you use a range of techniques, you will see a much broader spectrum of the fish community present. Bottom left there is Deptford Creek in London with our standard 15 meters by 2.7 meter seine net with 3mm mesh, very small seine net. Centre is a small winged fight net set on a foreshore in the Tyne Estuary upstream of the city. And to the right there is something we call a push net that's got 1mm square mesh, knotless mesh, which means you use it in small puddles like this, or you could use it as you saw before in a small drain. You can use it as a scoop net, a small seine net. It's very, very suitable for citizen science operation because it's so small and light and portable. And this is part of the key. This is keeping everything as simple as we can. Next slide, please. These sites in red are all ones we did last year. So we're spread all over England. We only got one site so far in the northwest, I must say. Of interest, the blue points show some additional ones we want to do this year. And only a fortnight ago, we got the clearance from Natural England to be funded again this year. Some of their projects under MNCA have been cut back, but fortunately, we've been told we can go ahead. And Natural England are very hopeful this whole process can be made mainstream going into the future. Partly because they're so delighted by the number of citizen science groups we're getting involved in these. You can see on the right of the slide there, the series of places we fished in this year. We're delivering a lot of these surveys, but working in partnerships with others, like the Thames Estuary Partnership on the Thames, or the Wye Rivers Trust up in the northwest. We will do whatever they want to do, but we will make sure it happens in a way that is both safe, is producing good data, and engages the public as much as possible. Thank you. Next slide. This just shows you the range of habitats involved. Top left is 5 a.m. in the morning down on the at Budley Salterton on the Otter Estuary. Beautiful location, lots of fish present. Centre at the top is Point Worth on the Thames, which is a small small artificial terrace put in some years ago where we're trying to assess the association of fish with that site. That was one of the original Estuary Edges sites, which Thames Estuary Partnership are now trying to resurvey, and we're supporting them through citizen science. Top right is an artificial terrace built into the Tyne Estuary at Hebburn by the Groundwork Trust, and we went in to survey that with their rangers you saw before to see how fish are using these sites. In the centre there is Tom and myself waiting on the wire for the tide to come in, but it shows the expansive nature of these muddy areas, these mud flats. Bottom left is the Deben Estuary in Suffolk. They're a very keen new interest group who want to set up full survey program, 3 or 4 sites, spring and autumn, a la WFD, but doing it closely from the shore without a boat and a big net. Bottom centre is, many people will know that is Bow Creek on the Thames estuary. Interesting phenomenon here where salt marsh vegetation is now breaking through riprap rock put in 40 years ago to do with the Thames barrier, but it's now becoming a salt marsh area. And it's performing like that for the fish community. And bottom right is a quite remote shot up at Lindisfarne, where and this is an interesting point of this, the agency now realised because of MNCA that they have to demonstrate all of the benefits if they're going to make some small intervention. So we can get in and help them demonstrate what fish were there now, as well as other ecological attributes as well. It all fits into a more integrated approach to flood risk management going forward. Next slide, please. This is the range of partners we've been working with. We've looked at 94 volunteers in total over a year. It's a huge range of people of interest, everything from the EA to the IFCA staff want to get involved in this and be trained themselves. Some of them are anglers like the Bass Angler Sport Fishing Society. Some are landowners, some are rivers trusts. We don't mind. Whoever wants to get involved in this, we're very keen to help wherever we have the resources to do so. And it's worthwhile saying that as we grow with this, and we've been funded this year, last year it was very much me, my wife, my estate car and our equipment dashing around the country with a lot of local help. This year it's going to be 4 of us in the agents in the IFM, which I'm training. We'll be doing this over the country in a more ordered manner, but this is a growth. Thank you. Next slide. Just to show you some of the volunteers and the quality of them. Bottom left, Derek is somebody I was privileged to meet. He is 94 years old, would you believe? He turned up late summer last year in the Helford River, lovely location in Cornwall, in a zipped up dry suit, driving himself to the site, and said, I may never do this again, but I've done it for 30 years. I want to do it one more time if you're coming to help us. Lovely man. Top right, the 2 ladies there are legendary. They're on the Otter Estuary. The lady with the white hat on, Patricia, says, I don't want to get my hands dirty, but I'm an extremely good statistician. I used to be when I worked. The morning after each survey, she will send me a superbly detailed spreadsheet of all the notes we've made, all the fish we've recorded, everything. They're holding up what we call a Perspex fish viewer. We can measure fish's length without even touching it now, a small fish. And this is part of it. Keep it simple and make as few interventions as possible. Again, the ladies in the top right have now been trained 4 times. There's 12 of them down on the Budleigh Salterton area. There's a large realignment that's being built, and in fact, the breach is happening this year. I've been down there 2 years running. And this year, we go in to sample how the fish use a new area of breach. Fantastic people to work with. Real privilege to work with these people. Next slide, please. What have we found? What did we see? This is interesting. We found sort of things that I would expect from my technical background. Common and sand goby everywhere. Lots and lots of grey mullet coming in very actively on the tides, feeding the area and leaving and again. But then we find some exciting things. We found the first records of a mackerel ever in either a managed realignment or the bottom of a salt marsh. This is an oceanic species which doesn't come into close inshore because we were there at precisely the right time, the right equipment. These volunteers can honestly say we found something new to science. This work is also important in terms of climate change. As it says, the most northerly record of thin-lip grey mullet and sand smoke. These are southern warm water species slowly moving up the east coast of England, and nobody's noticing that. We can be monitoring that as we go along. Next slide, please. This is how we pretend to present our results. I should say that we gather all the data and I produce a small technical report in layman's language for each client, but then we are amassing all of the data to be able to work with Natural England in the future and make this open source data that everybody can benefit from. And already a lot of this data is shared with colleagues in CFAS and elsewhere who don't stick their fingers in the air and say, oh, but that's citizen science, that's not proper. They respect there are good scientists like myself behind this who can organize it in such a way that it is robust, basic scientific observations. Next slide, thank you. There's one. This is about limitations in the data, but that photograph is one of the first photographs ever for young of year mackerel. That's less than 3 months old. That one's, what, 10 centimeters in length? They haven't been seen before. That was actually in the salt marshes at Budleigh Salterton. that only came in on a very, very big spring tide for maybe half an hour. We just happened to be there in the right place at the right time. And that's one of the issues. You have to recognize this. This ecology is so dynamic that we're only capable of doing single spot samples. Now, from my background, I know all of the seasonality of this, so I can make some sense of that. But each spot sample will show you something completely different, because those fish are not living in these locations for more than a few seconds. They're moving all the time. So we have to build that into our process. We also have to build in better accuracy of identification of fish from volunteers. We now have an extremely good A5 waterproof guide, originally developed by Zoological Society London. We'll now be working with them in the future to upgrade that and put more photographs and more information in there. But that sort of process is vital to help these volunteers go forward. Next slide, please. And there are some problems in this. Trying to get the right number of volunteers together for this is sometimes difficult. This is no criticism at all, but we seem to find more commitment in the rural areas, people who live there and identify with the area, than in the urban areas where you can put out an internet call and you get lots of people signing up and only a few of them turn up. So we have to find ways of making sure that these pieces of work can go ahead as planned, because they take a lot of planning. We've also got to allow for the weather and the tides. And that's sometimes a problem if somebody asks us to do a site and we don't have time to check it first, because each tide will be different. It won't be the same. The weather conditions will alter. We really need to understand these sites so that we can sample them effectively. One thing we learned last year is try and aggregate them in geographical areas, because if you don't, you end up going past the Tyne on the way to Lindisfarne when you did the Tyne last month and the Tees the month before. That's not very efficient, obviously. So we're trying to organise this year's workload in a better way. And I should say, going forward, when we've organised this workload, if anybody listening in has an interest in participating or at least observing one of these surveys, please get in touch with us and we can show you the programme and you're welcome to turn up. I would say that we are very careful with the health and safety. We train the volunteers and we can only accept 6-8 volunteers to help us physically do the survey, but we can accommodate more people who turn up as observers. And in fact, some of our surveys are part of open environmental educational days, such as Tidefest, which happens each September. This year's now September the 17th, Strand on the Green at Kew. We may have thousands of people down there dealing with us and other organisations. So we can deal with larger crowds, but in remote locations, it's difficult. We've only got so many helpers to keep an eye on people. Next slide, please. Here's some of the highlights of our work. We knew beforehand that salt marshes and estuaries are a very important nursery ground, but we can now demonstrate that in so many new sites that nobody has seen any data from before. We're helping monitor climate change through this process. We keep all the costs down. This isn't cheap data that some regulator should do. The regulator would never have the capability to do all this data. We're intelligently filling in gaps in the data record, but yes, we can do it at low cost. One of the things that's very often underlooked here is the social benefits that come from this process. Now, this feeds across directly into estuary MoRPh. These volunteers hadn't done something like this before. They really want to engage. They get very enthusiastic. They go away and champion what you're doing or you're studying to other people. And in some instances, I found they even change the local political landscape so that people are prepared for environmental change much more efficiently because people are championing on our behalf. Thank you very much. Next slide. So in the future, we're developing some of our early groups who we've now trained a lot to bought some of their own gear. They may be able to do their own surveys in the future. And we're sitting there remotely, still providing some technical support. We don't have to be on site every time. That's further down the road, but that's the direction of travel. We want to develop links with many more bodies who might want to engage in this sort of thing, and also coordinate with other citizen science groups so that somebody today who's a bird watcher who wants to do something different could get hold of a gazetteer and say, I can go and do a fish survey 3 days from now, and I could go and help estuary MoRPh the following week. We can get a lot more energy out of this process and get more people involved. That needs wider collaboration, so it's something we're very keen to help with. Next slide, please. And that's just me signing off. That's the Sea with Alice Canary Wharf. That's the Point Wharf site. I did it two times this year. One with some RSPB volunteers through Thames Estuary Partnership who simply want to engage in this sort of thing in future. and then a second time for 20 UCL students, MSc students. So there's a very strong educational part to what we're doing here. By the way, bottom right is my colleague Paul Coulson, who couldn't be here today. There will be, as I say, 4 of us going forward, so we can do more of these surveys, a bit less stress on the individual and be a lot more efficient. Thank you, that's me.
Absolutely perfect. Spot on with your timing there, Steve. I can't fault you at all. It's really exciting to hear about all the work that you're doing, and I know how passionate you are about linking up with what we're doing with the estuaries work as well. Thank you for your support. And we're going to hand over now to Heather Stott at Wyre Rivers Trust to hear about her project. I'll stop sharing so that you can share your slides. And I know you've been working with Steve as well. We're looking forward to hearing about that. Thank you.
Can you see my slides in full screen?
We can't see full screen yet. We can't see the slideshow, but we can see your slides. There we go. Yes.
So you can see it now. That's fine. Okay, so my name is Heather Stott, and I'm the science officer at Wyre Rivers Trust. And for the past year, we've been using the MoRPh Estuaries survey method to support a salt marsh restoration project. So we've surveyed a number of sites in the lower, mid and upper estuary. And many of these sites we've selected because they were previously sites where we have existing records from either bioblitzes or electrofishing surveys. This year, we also have another 3 Seas project, which is looking at juvenile fish populations and habitat pressures which affect their populations. We're going to also use MoRPh Estuaries to complement that data. So today I'm going to really focus on the lower estuary, and the salt marsh that we have there is the largest ungrazed area of salt marsh in northwest England. We've really got succession in action on the salt marshes. We've got pioneer species on the mud flats, and then you get more developed complex communities of complex vegetation communities as you go up. And with each community type, vegetation community type, we have very specific assemblages of invertebrates, fish and birds that use these vegetation habitats for food and shelter. So they're really important to promote biodiversity. Other ecosystem services, flood defence, that's one of the main reasons for our salt marsh restoration project, how we got the funding. They're also great at improving water quality because the sediment in there has lots of ions that can bind sediment, that can bind pollutants, removing them from the water. At the same time, everyone said this so far, blue carbon sequestration is increasingly on the agenda. And because of the waterlogged features, they're basically the new peat bogs. So everyone needs to consider salt marshes more and more in the future. However, our salt marshes in the Wyre estuary, much like the rest of the UK, are under a number of threats, from excess nutrients, a loss of habitat and biodiversity, contaminants and pollutants, erosion, accelerated rates of sedimentation, carbon loss from sediments, changes to freshwater and tidal flows, invasive species and climate change. So if we think about a bit of an introduction to our Arm Hill Restoration Project, it's on the site of complex salt marsh, so we don't have the classical linear embankment that you might find. It's very undulating, and within the salt marsh, on the edge there is a spit, and that was home to the last tern colony in Lancashire in the 1950s. From 1950 to 1970, that site was used for gravel extraction. Since then, the site was abandoned and scrubland has developed. When the site was used for gravel extraction, they built a culvert and this culvert has led to recreational disturbance issues from walkers and dogs, which has facilitated the access. It's important to note it's not a public right of way, so we need to think about issues with community engagement, because most people there just think they can go on it when it is private land and it's a triple SI. We are currently in the planning phase of this project, and we're working with a number of other partners. So the main aim of the Arm Hill restoration project is to reduce coastal and fluvial flood risk in the wider catchment. So we can do this by altering the culvert, which has facilitated their access to the gravel site, and by altering the culvert will then increase the area that's inundated by water. This will restore natural processes on the salt marsh, and also will return some agricultural and salt marsh, and the scrub that has developed on Arm Hill itself will be removed and returned to suitable little tern breeding habitat. So this is an aerial image taken from cartographer, and you can see my mouse, can't you? Yeah. So you can see Arm Hill at the bottom of the screen here, and the wider salt marsh. There's about 2 kilometres of salt marsh expanding southwards, which we also conducted more surveys along the edge of. But this is the kind of main focus of the project. So you can see here is the location of the culvert, and even on the aerial images you can see how unnatural the area immediately after the culvert is compared to the rest of the salt marsh. So we've identified a number of pressures. So anthropogenic pressures, we have trampling of the salt marsh by walkers and dogs, and also litter pollution. So some litter pollution has been purposely brought there by the walkers and dumped. Other litter pollution has come in on the tides and been back in the rack. We've also had 2 boats abandoned on the salt marsh, which isn't great and is an increasing problem across the UK, I understand. So we also have identified problems with invasive species using the MoRPh methodology, MoRPh Estuaries methodology. We have cordgrass, extremely prevalent, and using the surveys year on year, we're going to be able to see if it's expanding, the rate of expansion, and also how it's affecting the biodiversity, and whereabouts in the estuary, well, in the salt marsh profile, the cordgrass is. Some people say it's a good thing in the pioneer zone, but if it's swamping the pioneer zone and getting rid of the Salicornia, it's not a good thing. You may think it's good at stabilising the salt marsh, but it's not natural, and your salt marsh is stable if it's functioning well. And this is another picture of the cordgrass, and you can see how widespread it is. We've also identified areas with extreme erosional pressures. So this was taken basically just on the culvert. You can see this large erosion complex. If it's eroding like this, if it's there, it's unstable, you're getting more sediment transported into the river. You are also getting a loss of the carbon storage potential. All the carbon that would have been stored in that sediment is now free and probably readily transposed to CO2 and lost to the atmosphere. If you have a look at, this is the same area of the culvert. You can see the pressure that the water's going through, how unnatural this is compared to the rest of the salt marsh. So then if we have a look at the indices that MoRPh estuaries that cartographer gives us as an output. If we have a look at the E10 indices index, which is vegetated, well, signs of erosion in the vegetated intertidal zone, and you can see hotspots on the outside of Arm Hill on the south side, and also at the culvert. The rest of the salt marsh is functioning okay-ish, but we've really got these hotspots that need addressing, and hopefully the restoration project will do that through alterations to the culvert. However, there are limitations with using MoRPh estuaries that we found in the last year. So, as I said, we do not have classical lineal succession present. It's quite difficult to identify the exact areas of middle marsh, lower marsh, and upper marsh. Well, mainly middle marsh and lower marsh and pioneer zone, because it does undulate so much. Another issue is that this is a bank top survey, and due to health and safety, and also because this is a triple SI site, we do not want the volunteers going trampling across the salt marsh to get to the pioneer zone or the intertidal and vegetated zone. So we have got our surveyors to have stand on the bank top and, as Geraldine said, record what they can see. They don't guess, so we don't actually measure, do the full survey, but then we've gone and conducted drone surveys, and using the drone survey data, we'll be able to look at all the information that's present. We'll be able to gather a lot of the information, missing information from the drone surveys on the pioneer zone and the vegetated zone, because this is an area that's sort of 2 kilometres from bank top to sea. That's quite a way. But we've also decided to do bolt-on vegetation surveys. So this will really help us look, we're hoping, at the spread of cord grass. There's no cord grass, thankfully, in this picture, but we'll be able to see the specific species assemblages that are there. So, as we mentioned before, this is a citizen science project, and we initially trained a team of 12 citizen scientists. I say we have at least 6 who regularly return for surveys, which is very good. It is a challenging survey. A lot of them at the beginning weren't confident to do it on their own, but say after a couple of months of surveys, they were happily going to do a module on their own, because it's kind of a higher level of citizen science, because we need to ensure the data they're collecting is robust. We wouldn't encourage a citizen scientist to go out on their own and do this. We do it as a group activity, and I think that also leads to better data collection and sharing of information. And our citizen scientists have become real advocates in their communities. You see them on Facebook sharing all the importance of salt marshes, all the important functions of salt marshes that they've learned, and they're just fantastic. But thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you, Heather. That's absolutely brilliant, and you're absolutely right. It's citizen science, and it's a survey which we hope will be useful for research purposes and professionals as well, such as yourself as project officers. And yeah, we definitely was something that we learned from the first part of the pilot, that it's at the upper end of the spectrum for citizen science surveys, just to be completely transparent about that with everybody who's on the call. But it's something which we strongly believe is complementary to other, the full suite of different options that citizen scientists could get involved in, from things which are, perhaps less challenging as entry level citizen science, and then progressing on to more demanding assessments and methodologies which fit in with the science and what we're trying to gather in terms of evidence and data. I'm going to not say too much now, but hand over quickly to Hannah to tell us more about how the pilot went for you in terms 21 as well.
Oh, lovely.
We can see your slides with just got it.
Lovely. Cool. Just getting the right screen up on mine. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm the Catchment Partnership Development Officer at Thames 21. So I'm also the co-host for the Your Tidal Thames Cover Catchment Partnership. So that's my role in this. So just a quick introduction to the tidal Thames. So the tidal extent of the Thames actually extends 96 miles all the way down from Teddington through London, out through Essex and Kent, where it meets the North Sea. So the upper reach around Hammersmith tends to be fresh water, then it moves into brackish, and then downstream from Greenwich we get this marine system. So just a quick overview of some of the habitats that we get along the Thames. So within the upper reach, you've got these important tidal freshwater habitats, lots of gravel foreshores, islands, and also large areas of natural riverbank, as well as hard defences. So as you move into the middle reach, you get a much more urban environment, and sort of industrial influences. So lots more vertical walls, flood defences and docks. But interestingly, these artificial structures do provide habitat. Many of them are been there a while, and they have become colonised by sort of estuarine plants and animals, lots of birds using them to roost in. Cool. And you also get areas of marginal salt marsh and sort of reed beds within the tidal areas for the tributaries. So there's quite a few rivers that flow down into the tidal Thames. And then within the lower reaches, as the estuary widens, you get much more salt marsh and sort of reed beds, sort of shell and shingle banks, mud flats and areas of seagrass as well. So this is a nice image that I've stolen from the ZSL State of the Thames report, which is well worth a read if you want to know more about habitats in the Thames. So as you might expect, along with other estuarine systems, there's a lot of pressures within the tidal Thames. It's a very busy space. So you've got port activity, commercial fishing, as well as recreational activities and lots of development. So as you can imagine, the development encroaches into our habitat spaces, but as well as being a threat, sort of there is an opportunity there with future development to enable habitat creation, to sort of soften those edges and create more space for nature. Habitat fragmentation along the river is an issue. It's really important to be able to migrate up and down for a lot of species. So we need to think about it's not just the size of the encroachment, it's also sort of where it is and if it's interrupting those migratory pathways. Lots of commercial activity which can cause disturbance. And there's also dredging as well to maintain access, which sort of disrupts sort of the flows and alters the habitat that you get within the estuarine environment. But again, lots of opportunities here as well. So lots of evidence now of using the dredged materials to sort of enhance and create intertidal habitats within the Thames. Other things we've got going on, so recreation again can cause disturbance and damage to natural habitats. We've got lots of problems with litter and plastics in the river, and invasive species such as floating pennywort can degrade the quality of habitat you get. And then you get other modifications as well as all of the hard engineering along the riverbanks, structures such as weirs and barriers, alter the flow of water and sediments, which reduce the dynamism you get within these systems. And then also, as with other estuaries, at threat from sea level rise, which will result in habitat loss and increased erosion. Particularly within the Thames as well, there's a lack of knowledge. It's not a particularly well studied system, as with estuaries in general. But also we've got huge numbers of people who live right next to the river through London, who don't know much about the system, don't have much understanding of the ecology, how it works, and what a healthy estuary system looks like. So what did the team do last time when we had our MoRPh Estuaries pilot? So 15 volunteers were trained up and they completed 5 surveys at 2 locations, so Barking Creek on the River Roding and Bow Creek on the River Lee. So what did we learn from the pilot project? First thing was that in-person training was preferred. We did an online training session due to COVID, but the volunteers felt much more confident with methodology following the in-person training because they were able to practice immediately, able to ask more questions, and also enjoyed being part of a team and a group, which was particularly helpful. Something to consider when working in the Thames is access can be challenging to actually visualize the habitats, and also access to facilities. A lot of people are traveling quite big distances, and that was a concern raised for a lot of people. But also in terms of access, thinking about whether it's accessible by public transport, how people are getting there. As was already mentioned, it is quite a challenging survey, so some existing knowledge of the habitat is really, really helpful. Something we at Thames 21 struggled with was following the initial pilot project. We didn't build it into the project so much, so people dropped off a little bit because we didn't provide that ongoing support and supervision. So having supervision at surveys is really important for the first few times of going out. So being able to build it into projects where you've got ongoing group surveys will be really important moving forward. And after that as well, we had a feedback a presentation at the end of the project, and lots of other organisations and groups are interested in using the tool, which sort of shows that there is a desire for this sort of knowledge and ecological survey out there. So what are we hoping to get out of the MoRPh Estuaries project this time? The first thing we want to do is spot opportunities to restore and enhance habitats along the estuary. So this will involve going out with community groups and volunteers that are already working in these spaces and supporting them to use MoRPh Estuaries to assess the habitat and make good decisions about how to manage and restore these spaces that are really based on data and evidence. We could also repeat these surveys to monitor projects and assess the ecological impact in quite a practical way. So at Thames 21, we're in the early stages of training up a new team of surveyors since the pilot project, and some of the projects that we're now looking to implement MoRPh Estuaries in include our Carrera Wharf project. So we're working with Thames Estuary Partnership and the Estuary Edges project to do work with the local community to co-design a habitat improvement scheme. So we're doing lots of engagement work with local residents and getting them involved in how to improve this space. And having MoRPh Estuaries as a survey could be a really nice way of introducing people into this habitat and getting them to see what's there and understand what needs to be done to make it better. There's a new Catchment to Coast project, which is looking at installing innovative nature-based solutions to tackle issues with flooding and erosions at 3 sites along the estuary. So one of these solutions is actually using potato matting to encourage siltation and salt marsh regeneration. And again, a key component of this project is about engaging the local community and providing them with opportunities to be involved. So conducting these surveys would be an ideal way of doing that. So we're increasing the education and awareness of the local communities of that environment while doing the restoration work as well. So we have our Thames River Watch programme. So this is an existing network of volunteers who are already out collecting important data on the river, particularly around litter. The groups run their own cleanup activities. It's already highly engaged in this environment. So by combining the data that they're already collecting with the outputs of MoRPh, we can start looking at things as sort of judging what the ecological impact of all the litter is, which could be a really interesting thing to look at. So here's a photo of someone on our big wet count. So that's an ongoing survey that we can incorporate MoRPh data into. We also have a project down at Deptford Creek, which is a slightly different project to the ones we were using before. This is looking at how we leverage green finance to improve riverbanks, which sort of delves a bit more into the potential professional uses of MoRPh estuaries. But Deptford Creek is also an estuary edges site, which is where I've nicked these photos from the TEP website. So we can assess how the environment has, the ecology has changed as a result of the improvement works and the restoration work that went on there. So that's just a few of the sites that we are wanting to link up with MoRPh estuaries, but there are lots more, which sort of feeds into our next aim of the project, which is to improve the understanding of habitat conditions across the Thames estuary. So to be able to do this, to build a data set across a bigger space, we need to bring in more organisations and more volunteers. So we're looking at providing training to other practitioners who work with volunteers to deliver habitat improvement to build this data set. Towards the end of the project, we also hope to have a few people trained up as trainers. So we'll be able to work with new staff and volunteers beyond the scope of the next couple of years, so beyond the 3Cs funding, so that hopefully the MoRPh methodology is more sustainable and we can use it going forward more easily. And next, we also want to engage people and the communities living next to the Thames. We really want people to know more about the river and its habitats. The more people know, the more they will appreciate this space and become advocates to protect and improve the river. So how we're about to do this, we need to take the outputs of the surveys that we complete and ensure that they're effectively communicated with the communities. So we need to teach people about these habitats and what the indices mean, show them what's good and what's bad, and use the indices to justify why we think that and what can be done to improve. So a few of the methods that we can use to do that is promoting the story map, looking at other online platforms such as social media, but also outreach events, carrying out walkovers of the sites to introduce people to the habitats, and also presentations during community design workshops and things like that. So excited to see where that goes forward. That's me done.
Absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much, Hannah. That was really, really interesting and great to hear about your future ideas for working with MoRPh estuaries in the tidal Thames as well. And part of this project, as people will know, Hannah works, she said at the beginning, in partnership. So one of the things is to build up our network of people and organisations that we're working with through the new coastal partnership network as well. And we were delighted in this phase to start working with a new partner. So you'd probably realise that we're working with the Rivers Trust. That's why we're lucky to be hosted by the Rivers Trust and Rebecca for this webinar. And we've also welcomed a new national partner, the National Trust, and Helen Jay is here for the National Trust to tell us a bit about why they're interested in working with MoRPh Estuaries. So I'll hand right over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Lucy, and hopefully my technology issues will have all been done
Against
and dusted
all the
now.
odds, you're here. Thank you.
It's been exhausting, but let me just try and, that might be my next thing, to try and find, share my presentation. So
Just going to say, if you have any difficulties, then we can share slides for you if that's helpful.
yeah, that might be easier actually, if you don't mind.
Just give me a moment, perhaps while you introduce yourself, and I will be right
Okay,
with you with the
thank
slides.
you. Excellent. So my name is Helen Jay. I'm the Senior National Consultant for Coast at the National Trust, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to the team for sort of inviting us to join in with this project, and hopefully take it through to the at least the next couple of years, assuming, fingers crossed, we get our funding. So it's a really exciting project, so really pleased to be involved in this. And I thought I'd just talk a little bit about what our interest is, why we were keen to be involved, and really this touches on elements that the earlier speakers have been talking about. Next slide, please, Lucy. So the National Trust, we're the largest conservation charity in Europe. We don't just look after historical houses and parklands. We also have 250,000 hectares of land that we look after. That includes 1,255 kilometres of coast and around 3,750 kilometres of riverbank. And that's across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And all these areas are designated for their heritage, landscape and nature. So that puts a significant onus on us as custodians of that land to look after it responsibly and manage it and manage its condition into the future. Next slide, please. So in terms of our land, outdoors and nature ambitions, these are some of the key ones on the right hand side here, but I think ones that are particularly pertinent to MoRPh Estuaries are the delivering better, bigger, more joined up, creating and restoring in partnership 25,000 hectares of priority habitat beyond our boundaries, and also making sure all our land management decisions are climate informed. We also have our net zero ambition, and this includes restoration of some of those carbon rich wetlands. Next slide, please, Lucy. So really what we see as the key benefits to the National Trust from being involved in the MoRPh Estuaries project is firstly that ability to collect large and meaningful data sets. Now, there's a number of reasons that we're really interested in doing this. Firstly, it's to establish the status of priority habitats and species. So what condition are they in at the moment, and what's that telling us about their health? We're also really interested in tracking that change over time and distance. So this might be simply to understand how those systems are responding to our changing climate or changing pressures. But also the second element of this is really to monitor success of any interventions that we undertake. And we're hearing from Heather and Hannah about some of the work that they've been doing with respect to that. And again, that's something we're really interested in going forward. We're also very keen on that catchment scale management. So this touches on that earlier ambition of working beyond our boundaries. In some locations, we're incredibly lucky that our land ownership pretty much covers a significant part of a catchment, but in many other areas, we're working with other landowners, and having sort of data and ability to collect data across that catchment, working with others, is going to be really powerful moving forward to both justify undertaken work and also monitoring success of any work that we do. And this really pulls into that source to sea or catchment to coast approach. Another key ambition of the Trust is really increasing that connectivity between people and nature. And we have a huge resource of volunteers at our fingertips. We have around 44,000 volunteers across our whole business. Obviously, not all of those working in natural environments, but a high proportion of people really interested in working on our sites. We also have highly trained rangers at each of our locations. And again, they're very experienced already of working with volunteers in order to collect data. So embedding that MoRPh Estuaries approach should be fairly easy and be a real brilliant addition to our data set and tool set. We also see opportunities, as Hannah was talking about, of working with local communities and really getting them to appreciate what's on their doorstep. They're our most powerful advocates for looking after nature in our natural environment, and bringing them on board by understanding what's there, what the pressures are, and what they can do to continue restoring and improving nature is really important. We also see that there is potential for this information to be shared with schools and young people. So again, building up that next generation to really build that understanding of why our estuaries are important, and the benefits that they bring both for nature and the local communities that live there. So that's all I have to sort of say at the moment, but as I said, really excited to get involved in this project and hopefully start embedding some of that techniques and tool sets into the way that we're working at the moment. So thank you very much, Lucy. Back over to you.
Thank you, Helen. That was really excellent, and it's really exciting to be working with you. And yeah, it's lots of things that I'm looking forward to very much in terms of aiming to scale things up as we've been on this sort of trajectory through the pilot to phase 1. Phase 2, we are in the process of planning our application for funding for the forthcoming year, and we're really excited about the prospect of potentially having longer than about 6 weeks to deliver the project for that year before the end of year. And yeah, just thinking about where we can extend to next, and it being an Environment Agency funded project. There are plans for more funding for a phase 3. We can't count our chickens, obviously, but we're hopeful that we will be able to build on the successes and move forward. So the next part of our webinar is about sharing a little bit of an overview, and it's going to be me. So I'm going to have to share my slides again with you. You just bear with me. I'll just switch over to a different slide pack. And I'm going to just tell you a little bit more about what we've done in phase 1 and some of the results that we've been getting from the questionnaire that many of you very kindly have participated in. So as I've said, this was our focus of this part of the webinar is on phase 1, and you've seen already that we work with quite a number of partners who are here today. The Wye Rivers Trust have been the lead project manager role, and they've been absolutely excellent to work with. Last time it was Thames 21, so we've been really lucky to have very strong leads for this project. Having Steve from the Institute of Fisheries Management has been an absolute joy to work with him and see the significance of thinking about the value of marginal habitats to the biological communities who are under a lot of pressure, as well as the plant communities there. Nationally, we've been working with the Rivers Trust and now the National Trust. I'm from a very small independent organisation called Cartographer, which builds the software tools that sits behind the whole database, and I'm an independent consultant. I've been working with rivers and the development of assessment methodologies for a number of years now. As Geraldine explained, the method has come from research from Queen Mary University of London, and we started off with MoRPh Rivers, and now we're doing MoRPh Estuaries because we can get that catchment scale approach of source to sea. So our task for this part of the project for MoRPh Estuaries was to create the questionnaire, which we've shared with everybody. We're really keen to establish leads through the project officers that have been actively involved, so Hannah and Heather as part of Thames 21 and the Wye Rivers Trust, to establish that sort of lead role for championing MoRPh Estuaries in the northwest and the southeast of England as a starting point. We want to work together closely with them to draw upon their experience and expertise of working closely with their local groups and other local stakeholders, the partners in their patches, to develop and pilot this engagement and training plan. To be honest, that's been fairly limited opportunity in the time available in this phase, but we've been certainly starting the conversations and thinking and the planning for that and taking that forward to the next phase. We're also really keen to emphasize the importance of taking a scientific approach to reviewing and reporting on the data in order that it will provide effective evidence, and thinking about different applications and particularly that integrated analysis so that the physical habitat data can be used alongside of other important data such as the biological data, or as Hannah highlighted, sometimes litter and other types of information that's being gathered. A lot of people have flagged up their interests, and knowledge sharing, of course, is the last very important one, and that's how come we're doing this webinar today with you all, and it will be continuing. So these main themes will be continuing going forward as well. Just to quickly share with you some of the results from our questionnaire. We set out to do this sort of early on as soon as we had our funding confirmed, because we wanted to find out about other partners' needs for monitoring and assessing estuarine habitats. We had the method that had been developed as a companion survey to MoRPh Rivers, and we wanted to gauge the potential interest in accessing that training, especially if we could tap into some funding in order to make that possible. We also wanted to let people know about the tools that come with MoRPh Estuaries and the opportunity for initiating pilots in different parts of the country. And we distributed our questionnaire through the CABA newsletter, the Coastal Partnerships Network as a mail shot, and the Coastal Management Services, I think it is, I've forgotten the acronym, their newsletter, and the Modular River Survey website, which is the platform where we host all of our stuff about MoRPh. We were really excited to have over 60 responses as of yesterday. I think as of today, it's almost pushing up towards 70. And we have had a real high diversity of organisation plus independent people responding, which has been fantastic, over 36 at the last count, and roughly around 10 types of different organisations, ranging from people in DEFRA, EA, Natural England, all the way through to partnerships, both river and marine are represented, the NGOs are there, the trusts, and some consultants also, as well as academics, and people from local groups, which was really exciting to see, as well as some freelance people too. The majority of people were coming from mainly advisory or officer type roles, but the spread of coverage that we've managed to get in our answers, the respondents, has been so exciting. All parts of the country, people have expressed an interest. So we're really going to be thinking about where we can extend our connections going forward. In terms of the results, I've just picked out a couple of headlines that we were really interested in finding out about what people perceived were the main pressures that were relevant to their work in their parts of the country. And you can see that kind of leading the way for most people has been actually water quality, which is really understandable, especially because of all the awareness above all the discharges that are going into our water networks at the moment, coming downstream or maybe coming upstream if you're in transitional waters, but closely following after the water quality are the pressures, the combined pressures of the climatic changes, like sea level rise, and also coastal squeeze and encroachment perhaps from development. So the pressure physically on the margins coming from changes in climate, changes in perhaps storminess and weather and things like that, coupled with the pressure coming from the landward side, was really coming through there, and then closely followed again by the loss of species and biodiversity, and then again still very high there, flagging up the litter and problems with invasive species, and others I have yet to interrogate to see what was coming there, but really strong signals that were holding that pattern as we increased the number of responses over the last week or so when we gave our promotion a little push. The other thing that we were really keen to find out about was the evidence priorities for everybody who was responding. So we wanted to ask everybody, and again, the pattern has remained very consistent, that people were keen to learn more about priority habitats, as well as the physical habitat condition, as well as, and then of course water quality, which we've seen as high importance. But it was really encouraging. Obviously, you're all aware that MoRPh Estuaries is a survey that relates to physical habitat, but it's just reassuring to know that evidence will be useful on that front going forward. And of course, alongside again of the key species, which fits into our interests of doing that integrated analysis, hopefully too. Just the last one in terms of what we had from our questionnaire results were just to ask about whether people thought that MoRPh could be helpful, and we got a really strong signal. This was when we had 60 responses and almost 50 said they thought yes, which is really great. And the reasons why, I just did a very, very quick and dirty broad categorization on the headlines that were coming through on individual responses, and they seemed to break down in a way that pointed to evidence being the biggest driver for wanting to get out with a survey like MoRPh Estuaries. But also very important and closely following, if you combine them especially, was the engagement element. And I think knowledge building sits closely alongside of that engagement too. And indeed leading that forward to decision support is something which I'm quite passionate about, you know, being able to make that connection between the evidence and the outcomes. A few people highlighted also opportunities to identify where improvements could be made, and a couple of people weren't quite sure yet, which is understandable because you haven't really had a lot of information about what MoRPh Estuaries is through this process, but hopefully soon you will. We wanted to use the time quickly to do some polls, so I'm going to have to just quickly ask Rebecca, what's the process for doing the polls now? Because I've got the questions up here, but I think you're going to unlock the magic poll process for me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
problem. Yeah, so I'm just going to start by launching the first one, and then we can give however long you feel is appropriate to allow people to hopefully answer that one. I don't know if you can see the voting in real time. So yeah, when you judge that you've got as many answers as we're going to get, then I'll end it and I'll be able to share the results if you want to with the webinar now, or we can just look at that afterwards.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Rebecca. I don't know if so. By implication, I'm guessing that other people can't see the results until you reveal them. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Right. Okay. So we're doing quite well. We've got about 2/3 of people responding so far. Let's share the results. I think we've got a very clear signal coming through there.
Okay, so they're going to be visible to all our attendees now.
Fantastic. So that was just a quick warm-up question, a yes/no answer on whether the presentations that you've seen earlier have helped to illustrate a bit more about how MoRPh Estuaries might work in your local estuary. So that's really great. So if we could move on to our second question. There's kind of two parts to this question. We're going to start off with, I think there's a yes/no. Is that correct? Rebecca, do you want to talk us through how you've set this one up for us, please?
Yes, so this is also yes, no, but you'll see that there's a second question as well. So if you said yes, you can help just elaborate on your answer there. So we could maybe give a bit longer for this one. Are people seeing this one? And I just want to check that it's working.
I can't see it myself.
Not working. If you just give me 1 second, I will see if I can sort that.
We have to share with the audience, we've had quite a few technical challenges as part of our setting up the webinar. I think it's an inevitable thing after the end of the financial year, when everybody was quite busy with finishing end of year projects and then straight into Easter, and people obviously needed a welcome break after all of that. And then we had to follow through with making sure that we could get our webinar out to you all in a timely manner, as it was part of last year's project. Yeah, we can see that now, Rebecca. So
sorry about that.
That's all right. It's so this is interesting. We should have maybe said, if no, why not? So maybe say if, for the second part, you could say if yes or if no. Are there other ways in which you think you need other kinds of data to help in projects that you have currently? So the idea was whether you could envisage MoRPh Estuaries helping on any projects actually at the present. So this is the reason for this question is because we found in working through this project that for some partners, they will have projects which are ready immediately, as in working with Heather on the wire. They had a project which very quickly aligned, but working with others like 10-10-1, they didn't have an immediate match. So I think it's really important to acknowledge this and say that, I think as part of this process, we're keen to work with everybody to think about, what opportunities could be, kind of work towards in future. Okay, so we're getting a few answers coming through. If you share the results, Rebecca, are people still able to keep responding?
No, I can only do that once I've ended the
Only
poll.
once it's ended. Okay, we'll keep it open for another couple of minutes. Just I think people are still maybe pondering whether they do or they don't. It's some really interesting. I can't see what people are putting in terms of their short answers, but I can see the yes, no. Perhaps if we share that one. I'm just conscious of time and.
No problem.
So if everyone can see that now, you can see we've absolutely got a split down the middle on yes and no, and that's not surprising to me, actually. I think that's sort of what I probably expected, and we will be really interested to look in more detail at the additional answers that you've included there, and of course we're going to be keeping this line of communication very much open going forward, so that we'll be able to discuss where opportunities may arise. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This is also kind of ties in a little bit with the last one, and it asks whether you have existing groups of citizen scientists that may be ready to make use of MoRPh Estuaries training for local monitoring in the coming year ahead. There's a second part to it again. Are you going to have to do it again? Yeah, okay. That's all right. The second part to this question is, again, if you do, what we're really interested to find out about also is the different ways or formats that you find work best in sharing the monitoring evidence that you're gathering with your local stakeholders, whether that's the volunteers who are involved in gathering the data or other partners that you're hoping to influence. That looks like the poll is live again now. Great. So yeah, do you have any groups of citizen scientists that would be ready to get involved in doing MoRPh Estuaries? What's been really interesting is, like encourage our partners just to be really honest about the challenges and the limitations of using MoRPh. As we've said, it's on the upper end of the citizen science. But we strongly believe that we've got a method which is taught in a very straightforward way because of experience of working on MoRPh rivers. We know that with some, solid training. The method is step by step. It's a standardized approach, and with the support of a project officer, it's certainly something which is achievable for estuaries enthusiasts to be able to go out and gather data that is of interest to them. We're also keen to work with other academics as well, and other people who are involved in gathering data for research projects. So maybe if you don't have citizen scientists available, perhaps there may be organizations that you're working with linked with local colleges or universities. We're getting a few responses coming through. We're probably about halfway in terms of people. Maybe, again, maybe not everybody's in a role where they're working with local groups. Actually, that could be a reason why we're getting slightly lower response to the first question. Rebecca, do you want to share the results now?
Will do.
We'll see. So again, we can see that actually on this response, we've got more people who don't have groups currently. Again, that doesn't concern me overly, because I think we're all on a journey. We're all going to be finding more out about either on your side what MoRPh Estuaries is all about, and perhaps it's a little bit unfair to put you on the spot and get you to answer a question like that before you know a bit more about actually what the method involves. On the other hand, we're also learning from you in terms of what works best, and we have a standard method. We want to keep that consistency obviously around that method, but we also recognize that sometimes there will be ways that adaptations could be appropriate, as for example Heather mentioned, in using technology like drones, etc. So there could be other ways of gathering data also. Right, without further ado, let's hit our final question, because I think this one is an interesting one. Again, we're really keen to hear about not just all the successes, but all the challenges as well. And we're interested in what limitations you think could arise in using a method like MoRPh Estuaries in your location. So feel free to share with us what you think might be something which you might need to have a conversation about. We might need to take into consideration before it's just going to be something that will land comfortably. I think that looks like it's shared okay this time. We'll give people a little bit of time to answer. I have to say I'm new to Zoom events, and although I've been on quite a number that have been hosted by Rivers Trust in the past, being on the organising and presenting side is a new one for me. So thanks for your patience and all the little clunky bits along the way that we've had. Thank you everybody for giving us your answers. I can see people are still responding, so we'll give it a couple of minutes more. One question, Rebecca, I don't know if you know, for you, if people have started writing and we close the poll, does that mean that they lose their response? Or does it still get saved in the system? Do you know?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure, so I'd probably err on the side of caution, and just make sure that we give plenty of time. We can still keep the poll open whilst answering the Q&A questions. So if you're worried about moving on, then
that's a really good one. Thank you. Brilliant. Yeah, let's keep this one open then. And if anybody wants to use the opportunity just to share any other thoughts while it's open, please feel free to. Thanks for that. That's really helpful to know. So the last slide that I've got was really just a quick one about phase 2, which is obviously what's coming forward now. We're busy preparing our expression of interest to apply for the funding, and our vision for phase 2 currently, just to kind of summarize it, is that we're continuing to work with our existing partners, supporting them with their engagement, their progressing their engagement with other coastal partners in the regions that have been identified as part of the Coastal Partnership Network, also to hopefully see them continue to monitor through the projects that they've identified, working with volunteers and building evidence in their areas to help demonstrate the value of MoRPh Estuaries. As Hannah mentioned, we're keen to progress the plan for training. So we're providing support to train people through those partner organizations, but also taking them on a journey towards eventually becoming trainers themselves, so that they can also offer support around their parts of the country. And that will be help with training others, supporting ways of using the method, and also helping support on QAing the data as well that's recorded. For phase 2, we're keen to build new connections as well. We want to reach out to others across the Coastal Partnership Network to help people identify projects, perhaps projects you've got on the shelf at the moment which are looking for funding. Maybe there's an opportunity to build in additional monitoring activities within that as well. We want to extend the offer for MoRPh Estuaries training to you as well, as new connections for us, and offer support to you from Queen Mary and Cartographer as the sort of the primary leads on training at the moment. And if you're interested, I've put a contact email there. Please do feel welcome to drop us a line. I think that is everything for me for now. Just to say thank you to our current partners, thank you to everybody joining the webinar today, and we definitely want to keep the conversation open going forward. So we look forward to hearing more from you, and thanks if you said you'd like to stay in touch. So that's it from my part. We've got about 15 minutes left for questions, and we've got a few questions on the Q&A now. Perhaps if we close that poll for now, Rebecca, if that's okay,
No
and we can
problem.
share that. We had a really good response, actually. We've got 16 or so people responding on that, which is fantastic. Thank you. And we can see we've got a few questions in the Q&A. So I think probably the best thing to do would be to just do our best to pick up the questions as they are here in the chat. There's a couple for Steve around his presentation. Do you want to come off mute, Steve? And are you able to see the Q&A yourself, Steve?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Excellent, because there's one around
Several
the
there,
results and record centres, and if whether results of surveys are shared with local partnerships, the coastal partnerships and the record centres.
Yeah, fine. I'll deal with the first three if I can. That's Nick
Go
Broden,
for it.
Andrew Wolford, and twice. Nick Broden. Yes, Nick. What has happened each time is that we've done this piece of work effectively for the client, say that's a Rivers Trust or Environment Agency, but we've made it clear that we want to share the data with anybody. So it's anybody who requests us for that data. We also deliberately send the data to certain bodies like CFAS and others, but we have an open commitment to the data. What we're not doing is literally giving it to every local authority in that area that didn't know that we were necessarily doing such a survey, but we are very happy to present that data further. And how we do so is still to be evolved through discussions with Natural England, not in any way that they're trying to restrict this, but just organise it, because to date it's been a series of requests from individual parties. And what we want to build up is a long-term national database that people can dip into and small reports can be pushed out of. So it's a work in progress, but if you were interested in particular reports, Nick, I'm very happy to send you any ones of the 20 or so that we've done in the last 2 years or so. That answers that. Talking to Andrew, yes, we want to help in the Mersey rather, and following on from the smelt workshop in March, where we met and discussed some of these things, I can tell you that my colleague Paul Coulson has already been in touch with somebody on the Mersey. We're very happy to help there, and I understand a new Water Framework Directive style survey wants to be developed there somehow. We're very happy to be part of that technical discussion, and we could build it some help into our survey program this year. Thank you. On Andrew's third question, the ID guide available to buy. This ID guide was originally developed by ZSL with mine and other people's help as a guide for doing citizen science on the Thames estuary specifically. It's a very good little guide. It's in A5, waterproof, so it's good to use in the field. The difficulty is it doesn't have species that aren't found in the Thames estuary, which we've done a lot of with that nice photograph of the mackerel I showed. So our intention with the full collaboration of ZSL over the next year is to extend that and make it more comprehensive. In the meantime, I can at least get PDF versions of that guide to anybody who wants them. So I hope that answers the question, but physical ID of fish is so important. We want to take this forward quite quickly. We're having a discussion with Natural England at this very moment, oddly enough, because we were one of 5 MNCA projects last year. This year, through cutbacks, they've had to stop a lot of it. They've told us they think ours is so powerful, they wanted to go ahead. But that's with restricted funding. If we can get a little bit more funding, which they're hinting at the moment, that will be to develop a national database of data and develop an ID guide, and also to develop some protocols that standardize the approach so that other people can pick it up with more confidence that they're using the right sort of tools in the right place. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Standardized approach is absolutely fundamental to this. As a couple of people have asked questions about the how the method differs from MoRPh rivers. I meant to type an answer into Liz's question underneath, and then I clicked the wrong one, which said answer live. So I'm answering it live now. But also the question from Karen, who asked how it differs from MoRPh rivers, and Liz wanted to know where to find out more information. So what I'll do is I think I can type the website, the web address about MoRPh rivers into underneath Karen's question now. Basically, just the short answer is that we wanted to ensure some consistency and continuity between MoRPh rivers and MoRPh estuaries, and we're particularly interested in how MoRPh estuaries delivers for the upper parts of the transitional waters, upper and middle parts of estuaries. We recognise that as we get out towards the more open coast and much larger salt marsh areas, that there are limitations on what can be achieved from a kind of a human scale bank top style survey, and we don't want, you know, important sensitive habitats being trampled over, as Heather highlighted as well. So we're conscious that it's a methodology which may work better in some locations than others, and that's why we're really interested in exploring how the drone survey could also help with gathering data. So the similarity to MoRPh rivers is that it includes some of the features that you will find, particularly for the lowland rivers, but then also we've brought in a lot more around the specific habitat types that you will find in estuaries. So lots more around, we're working on physical features fundamentally, but we do draw upon identification of salt marsh communities, so it requires a little bit of identification of the particular key indicator species in order to make sure that you're identifying bits of salt marsh correctly if you're in that part of your estuary where salt marsh is present. I think it's something that we can definitely follow up on more in more detail for those who are interested in finding out more about the method. Well, the other quick question I was going to pick up on from Jessica was about whether the methodology has been developed based on data from estuaries in England only, or whether it will include others across the United Kingdom, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. At the moment, we've started off with using reference to English estuaries, but we're certainly not ruling out the opportunity to develop further to have relevance to more types. In fact, Geraldine, would you like to say anything about the consideration of estuary types, which with other work in a parallel project has been carried out?
Hi, yes. So we're doing a year-long study at the moment, and it started off by looking at, as Lucy said, estuary types, lots of literature on different types, and identified 8 main types across the UK. So we are actually, we've been picking the best exemplar sites, and we're doing the 3 final ones in the coming weeks. So we will have surveys with all the sort of exemplar characteristics of across these types, and they do. Unfortunately, we haven't got any from Ireland, but we do have England, Wales and Scotland. And then the idea will be to just continue to build those and get the information from which we can then develop our indices for, you know, the MoRPh estuaries to characterize, you know, when we collect data, we can characterize using these indices that are calculated on the cartographer platform. So the more information we have from the range of these 8 estuaries in different parts of the UK, the better. So yeah, we're working on that. I don't know if I'm able to share my screen, because I was just going back to the question about how MoRPh rivers and MoRPh estuaries differ. I've got a couple of nice diagrams which might illustrate, but I'll see if I've got my screen open. I'll see if I can share, and if it doesn't work, then we can share information afterwards.
That sounds great. Apologies for my
is
getting
that
it slightly
sharing?
wrong on the Scottish and the Welsh estuaries.
No, is that sharing?
It
now?
is sharing, yes, yes. And there's quite
Okay.
a variety of different estuaries, even around the English coastline as well.
Yeah.
But yes, of course, with Wales and
And
Scotland.
if anybody's going to the River Restoration Conference, we're giving a short presentation there, and that information will be in that oral presentation. And we also have a poster, but I'm happy to share those after the event, which will be Wednesday and Thursday this week. So so this one, can you see how to conduct a MoRPh estuaries survey?
Can.
So if anyone's familiar with MoRPh rivers, on MoRPh rivers, for those surveys, you can either do an individual module, we call it, or we recommend doing 5 in a sequence of modules, and the same for MoRPh estuaries, and they'd be typically 50 meters long for a MoRPh estuaries survey. So we sort of recommend to get full data to do 5 together. But in terms of the survey sheets, it's a field-based survey, and we have 4 sheets. On MoRPh rivers, we go from general information. We have bank top and floodplain, bank face, and then the channel bed. On MoRPh estuaries, we have the 4 survey sheets of general information again, and we have a sheet for the supratidal zone, the intertidal vegetated zone, so separated these 2 by identifying the drift line, and then we have a sheet which is the unvegetated intertidal zone and the subtidal together. So we have those ones, and this is the zones for a generic natural estuary, and this would be a situation. So this is Deptford Creek that Hannah was talking about. So if you have an urban estuary very developed, then you would have here, you've got your supratidal zone, and then you've got your vegetated intertidal and unvegetated intertidal, and then down here you can see just further if you go off this slide here, you'd be into the subtidal zone. So that's very brief, but I'm happy to explain more in detail later, but maybe that gives you an idea. And you know, as Heather was saying from Wye River Trust, there's a lot of detail in the survey, so it's kind of a high level citizen science survey, and it works well working, you know, together as a team and building that confidence. But it's very systematic, and the forms are catch-all for all estuary types. So once you've done the survey several times on your estuary, you'll be filling in sort of key sections of the form, and you know, build up confidence and expertise. But the rigor that's in here is to ensure that we have very good quality data, which is what Steve was emphasizing as well. So I think I've stopped sharing now.
Brilliant. Thank
Yeah,
you, Geraldine. That was
okay.
absolutely perfect, just within the last few minutes as well.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And I think it's, as you say, it's about going back and doing the repeat surveys where you're picking up the signs of change. That's really the critical thing once you've got that baseline data set. Anyway, we've timed out, and I just want to hand back quickly to Tom if you wanted to wrap up with any closing comments and before we run out of over the limit.
I don't think there's a lot to say, given that we've got to 4 o'clock. Thanks to all our speakers. Done a fantastic job, made it very easy for myself and Lucy. Thanks to Lucy for making sure everything ran so smoothly and we finished on time. And we do look forward to working with you all on this project. It does stand to be really exciting for our estuaries and coasts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. It's been brilliant working with everybody, and I hope others on the call will be interested in joining us.
Thank you, everyone. So
Thank you, Rebecca.
If anyone is coming to RRC, we'll have some laptops there, and we can also give you a demo of the cartographer platform if you're interested to talk.
We'll have a poster, and
yeah, by the post, we'll be by the poster stand. So yeah, we're happy to do that.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Rebecca, for taking good care of us in this session, and we'll say bye
That's
to
fine.
everybody.
Yeah, thanks all for joining. I'll close the webinar now, but I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their Monday, and I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.